Imagine you're shopping for a new bicycle. You walk into a store, excited to find the perfect ride, and you're faced with a choice that seems simple at first. You find two bikes, one made in the US for $250 and one imported for $200. Both look great, and both promise a smooth ride. Most people would naturally pick the cheaper bike, thinking they're getting the best deal for their money. But what if the government steps in and adds a special tax, a tariff, to the imported bike? Suddenly the decision isn't so straightforward. A tariff is a fee collected on goods brought into a country from abroad. It's a kind of border tax, and its main effect is to make imported products more expensive than they were before. For example, if a 25% tariff is added, the $200 imported bike now costs $250, matching the price of the US-made bike. Suddenly, the price advantage disappears. The goal of a tariff is to make domestic products more attractive, giving local businesses a better chance to compete against cheaper foreign goods. It's a way to protect jobs and industries at home. Tariffs are a classic tool of protectionism, used by governments for centuries to control trade and support home industries. They've shaped economies and influenced global relationships. But while tariffs can help certain companies and workers, they often mean higher prices for everyday consumers. Shoppers may end up paying more for the same products. The decision to use tariffs doesn't just affect businesses. It ripples through the entire economy, impacting shoppers, manufacturers, workers, and even the prices of goods we rely on. During the Trump administration, tariffs were placed on thousands of products, sparking a major debate about trade, jobs, and the cost of living. This raised a crucial question. Who actually has the power to impose tariffs? The president or Congress? The answer isn't as simple as you might think. That question would eventually reach the Supreme Court, where the nation's highest judges would weigh in on this important issue. Let's see how this debate unfolded and why tariffs remain such a powerful and controversial tool in global trade. The Trump administration's America First policy was built on the belief that foreign competition, especially from China, was responsible for the decline of US jobs and the shuttering of American factories. Many communities across the country saw manufacturing plants close, leaving workers without jobs and towns struggling to recover. The administration argued that decades of free trade had left American industries vulnerable and dependent on imports, undermining the nation's economic strength. To fight back, the US imposed tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars in imported goods. The first targets were solar panels and washing machines, but soon the list expanded to include steel, aluminum, and a vast array of Chinese products. These tariffs were designed to make foreign goods more expensive, hoping to shift consumer demand back to American-made products and encourage companies to invest in US manufacturing. The core idea was simple. By raising the cost of imports, Americans would be more likely to buy domestic products. This, in turn, would boost US manufacturing, create new jobs, and help revive struggling industries. Supporters believed this approach would restore pride in American-made goods and strengthen the economy from within. This strategy, rooted in economic protectionism, also aimed to defend key industries considered vital for national security, such as steel and aluminum. The administration argued that a strong industrial base was essential not just for economic reasons, but for the country's safety and independence. Tariffs quickly became a powerful negotiating tool. Other countries were told, agree to new trade terms, or face steep taxes on your products. The US used this leverage to push for better deals and to address what it saw as unfair trade practices. This marked a dramatic shift from decades of US policy that had favored free trade and open markets. Suddenly, protectionism was back at the center of American economic strategy, challenging long-held assumptions about globalization. The aggressive use of tariffs set off conflict abroad, sparking trade wars and retaliation from other countries. At home, it triggered a heated legal and political battle over the limits of presidential power and the future of American trade policy. But could the president act alone, or would Congress and the courts have the final say? The answer would shape the next chapter in America's economic story. As tariffs took effect, a legal question emerged. Did the president have the authority to impose broad tariffs without Congress? The Constitution gives Congress the power to regulate foreign commerce, but over time, Congress delegated some authority to the president, especially in emergencies. The Trump administration cited the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA, claiming unfair trade practices were a national emergency. Critics argued IEPA was never meant for sweeping trade changes, only targeted sanctions in true emergencies. This clash over separation of powers set the stage for a Supreme Court showdown. The Supreme Court agreed to hear the case, focusing on the limits of presidential power. States, importers, and industry groups argued the president overstepped, using IEPA to bypass Congress's constitutional role. The court ruled against the administration, citing the major questions doctrine. For issues of vast economic impact, Congress must give clear, direct authorization. The justices said IEPA lacked the explicit language needed to let the president launch a global trade war. The ruling reaffirmed that Congress, not the president, holds the power to set broad trade policy. The president can still act in specific emergencies, but not for sweeping economic changes. This decision was a major check on executive power and a reassertion of congressional authority. But what did all this mean for everyday Americans? While courts debated the legality and long-term impact of tariffs, Americans across the country were already feeling their effects in daily life. The consequences of these policies weren't just abstract. They showed up in the most routine moments, from shopping for groceries to paying monthly bills. Prices for everyday goods like washing machines, car parts, and shoes began to climb as companies passed the extra costs of tariffs directly to consumers. For many families, this meant stretching their budgets further, sometimes having to delay or forego purchases they once took for granted. Many U.S. manufacturers depend on imported materials to keep their operations running smoothly. When tariffs raised the price of these imports, companies faced tough decisions: either absorb the losses and risk their bottom line, or raise prices and risk losing customers. Some tried to innovate or find new suppliers, but solutions weren't always easy or affordable. As a result, some businesses were forced to lay off workers, or even shut down entirely, leaving communities grappling with job losses and economic uncertainty. Farmers, too, were hit especially hard. When countries like China retaliated with tariffs on U.S. crops, especially soybeans, the impact rippled through rural America. With China buying less, soybean prices crashed. This left American farmers with mountains of unsold crops, shrinking incomes, and mounting financial stress. Many worried about the future of their farms and their families. To help struggling farmers weather the storm, the government stepped in with billions of dollars in emergency aid. But for many, this support was only a temporary lifeline, not a permanent solution. While a few industries, like steel, saw short-term gains from the tariffs, most sectors suffered from higher costs and tangled, unpredictable supply chains. The benefits were uneven and often fleeting. Tariffs created both winners and losers, highlighting just how interconnected the global economy has become. A change in one country's policy could send shockwaves around the world. A policy designed to help one industry could unintentionally hurt another, showing that the effects of tariffs are rarely simple or isolated. The economic effects were complex, often unpredictable, and felt in every corner of the country, from big cities to small towns, and in households of all kinds. And the world didn't just stand by. Other countries responded, setting off a chain reaction that would shape global trade and the lives of millions for years to come. Other countries quickly retaliated against U.S. tariffs, sparking a global trade war. The European Union targeted American products like motorcycles, bourbon, and jeans. China hit U.S. agriculture. Canada and Mexico imposed tariffs on U.S. dairy and appliances. These moves aimed to pressure U.S. industries and communities to push for a policy change. American exporters suddenly faced higher costs and shrinking markets abroad. Businesses that relied on stable global trade scrambled to adapt to new barriers. The trade war disrupted supply chains, strained diplomatic ties, and made the global economy more unpredictable. Instead of negotiation, countries resorted to tit-for-tat tariffs. So, what happened when the tariffs ended? The Supreme Court's decision to end broad tariffs brought immediate changes. Prices for many goods dropped, easing pressure on consumers. Businesses relying on imports saw costs fall, improving competitiveness. Retaliatory tariffs were lifted, reopening foreign markets for U.S. exporters, especially farmers. However, Domestic industries once protected by tariffs now faced renewed foreign competition. The ruling highlighted trade's central dilemma: helping one sector can hurt another. Most importantly, power over trade policy shifted back to Congress, promising a more transparent and democratic process. What does this mean for the future of American trade? The Supreme Court's ruling reshaped American trade policy, restoring Congress's constitutional authority. Presidents can no longer impose sweeping tariffs alone. Major trade changes now require congressional debate and approval. This shift strengthens checks and balances, ensuring no single branch has unchecked power over the economy. For businesses, it means more predictability and stability, less risk of sudden policy shifts. The process is slower, but more democratic and transparent. The decision was about more than tariffs. It was about how America governs itself and engages with the world. Major trade policy is now a shared responsibility between Congress and the President. This restored balance will shape America's economic future for years to come.